After 3 weeks in isolation, the Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Onyema, emerges, having defeated the coronavirus. He speaks about his experience. Then, how historic is the deal between the United Arab Emirates and Israel? Countries are beginning to poke holes in the document put together by US President Donald Trump. Plus, insecurity in West Africa. Is access to weapons the only solution to winning the war on insurgency? Not just by Boko Haram, but by ISWAP. Former director of the Institute for Security Studies in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and now current second national vice president, Association of Retired Career Ambassadors of Nigeria, Ambassador Olusegun Akinsoya, will be joining us later on the program to talk about this. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us on Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Onyema, is hale and hearty, and thankfully, he survived the fearful coronavirus. He spoke to Channels Television the day he returned to work at the ministry on Wednesday.
I don't know how I caught it. Some people said that maybe the files that one treats in the office, you just cannot tell. You touch things, railings and so forth. So it's difficult to be categorical about the causes when there are just so many different ways of catching it. But it was just, I think, a cocktail about four things, really. So Zithromax, ivermectin, zinc, and then vitamin C and vitamin D. We shouldn't be worried about the issues of stigmatization and all that. Anybody can get it. It's not a crime if you get it. It's not anything to be ashamed of if you get it. It's almost like catching the flu or malaria, So people should not sort of sense that somehow, there's a stigma attached to it. And in my opinion, get tested immediately, just if you're just not feeling right.
Now here are other discussions in diplomatic circles. Nigeria and India have signed a memorandum of understanding on cooperation in the exploration and use of outer space for peaceful purposes at the Federal Ministry of Science and Technology, Abuja. Pen was put to paper on August 13, witnessed by Nigeria's Minister of Science and Technology, Dr. Ogbonnaya Onu, the Indian Minister of State for External Affairs, Shri V. Muralidharan, via video link, and Scientific Secretary, ISRO, M.R. Umamaheswaran, via video link from ISRO headquarters in Bengaluru. According to a press release by the Indian High Commission in Abuja, the MOU envisages Nigeria-India collaboration in space science, planetary exploration, ground stations, development of micro and mini satellites, and joint space R&D. It provides for capacity building assistance by the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, exchange of scientific know-how, exchanges between academic institutes and joint symposiums and conferences, cooperation in remote sensing, communications and navigation that will benefit Nigeria in the fields of forestry, environment, agriculture, mining, watershed development and connectivity. The US has threatened to trigger a return of all UN sanctions on Iran using a provision in the 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and world powers known as snapback, even though President Donald Trump abandoned the accord in 2018. President Trump made a threat on Saturday, a day after the UN Security Council rejected a US bid to extend a UN arms embargo on Iran.
They do. Iran is a whole different ballgame right now. They haven't been sponsoring terror because they don't have very much money to sponsor terror, and they know we just captured 4 Iranian ships, as you know, and we brought them into Houston. They were going to Venezuela. They're not supposed to be doing that. Iran would love to have me defeated.
Iran's foreign minister denounced President Trump's plan to call a snapback on sanctions after losing bid to extend a UN arms embargo. Mr. Mohammad Javad Zarif said the U.S. knew it had no legal grounds to trigger the so-called snapback mechanism, saying any such move would be illegal. A snapback of UN sanctions would require Iran to suspend all nuclear enrichment-related and reprocessing activities, including research and development, and ban imports of anything that could contribute to those activities or to the development of nuclear weapon delivery system. There have been more reactions since the United States announced last week it had drawn up a historic deal between the United Arab Emirates and Israel. And most Arab leaders don't feel it addresses the real issue, which is Israel's annexation in the West Bank, and almost perishes any plans towards a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine, among other things.
Well, thank you very much.
This is one of two major deals the U.S. president has struck in the Middle East in the hopes of restoring peace to the region. The new deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, brokered by President Trump, is expected to lead to a full normalization of diplomatic relations between the two nations.
After 49 years, Israel and the United Arab Emirates will fully normalize their diplomatic relations. They will exchange embassies and ambassadors and begin cooperation across the board and on a broad range of areas, including tourism, education, healthcare, trade, and security.
Under the agreement, Israel has agreed to suspend applying sovereignty to areas of the West Bank that it has been discussing annexing. It is the product of lengthy discussions between Israel, the UAE, and the United States that accelerated recently and sealed in a phone call Thursday between President Trump, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. U.S. officials described the agreement to be known as the Abraham Accords as the first of its kind since Israel and Jordan signed the peace treaty in 1994. It also gives a foreign policy success as President Trump seeks re-election on November the 3rd.
The future is very much...
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, responding shortly after in a televised conference, said it represents a new era to his country.
Well, today we usher in a new era of peace between Israel and the Arab world. I just came from an historic virtual conference between myself, President Donald Trump, and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates. We announced the establishment of a full and formal peace between Israel and the UAE.
He also said that extending Israeli sovereignty to parts of the West Bank is still on the table, but would be worthless without U.S. support. A senior Israeli official said applying Israeli sovereignty to areas of the West Bank territory Palestinians seek for a state along with Gaza and East Jerusalem was still on the agenda. As for the United Arab Emirates, the agreement with Israel to normalize relations was done to deal with the threat that further annexation of Palestinian territories posed to the two-state solution. The UAE's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Anwar Gargash, called on Palestinians and Israelis to return to the negotiating table.
Let us try and develop this organic relationship that is developing with Israel in many, many areas. And let's really try and get something tangible. Let us try and basically deal with the current threat towards a two-state solution, negotiations for a two-state solution.
The agreement has been rejected by Palestinians, with some calling it a conspiracy, while Israelis living in Jerusalem welcome it. Many Palestinians say they were blindsided after the announcement by the U.S. president. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas seemed to be taken by surprise by the deal. He has refused all political dealings with the Trump administration for more than 2 years, accusing it of taking a consistently pro-Israel stance. A senior advisor to the Palestinian President, Nabil Abu Rudaina, reading from a statement on Palestinian TV in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, said the deal was a betrayal of Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa and the Palestinian cause, and a recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The statement urged the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to assemble to reject the deal, adding that neither the UAE nor another party has the right to speak in the name of the Palestinian people. Leader of Lebanon's Iran-backed Hezbollah movement condemned the deal. Syed Hassan Nasrallah said in a televised speech that the U.S. president announced the deal because he needed an achievement ahead of U.S. elections. He said he expected a number of Arab states to follow the UAE example to satisfy Washington. Former Arab League chief Amir Musa says Arab countries that might follow the UAE's plans to normalize relations with Israel must secure respectable deals, adding that they must stand firm during any potential negotiations. He said they should strike deals that firmly address other issues pertaining to Palestinian rights. Meanwhile, several world leaders have taken to Twitter to back the U.S. brokered deal. They include a tweet by President Trump calling it a huge breakthrough. The Egyptian president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, said he valued the efforts of those part of the agreement aiming to achieve prosperity and stability in the region. While a tweet from the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, talked about the agreement.
Insecurity remains a hot topic in Nigeria right now. You must have noticed the rise in banditry and insurgency these past few weeks. So, we know the fight against insurgency has raged on for about 10 years now. But as the government, through the Minister of Information, Mr. Lai Mohammed, admitted last week, Nigeria needs more weapons and platforms to win the war. It lets us know we are in dire position. Mr. Mohammed called on the international community to support the federal government to tackle the numerous security challenges facing the country. While noting that foreign countries can do better in assisting Nigeria, he pleaded with Western powers not to deny the current administration's support due to what he describes as unsubstantiated arguments. He admitted that certain world powers have refused to even sell Nigeria certain vital weapons, regretting that the federal government is yet to receive some weapons despite paying for them for more than 2 years. We also learned last week the president debunked insinuations that insurgents operating within the country, especially Boko Haram, have more money and sophisticated weapons than government forces. He even queried security chiefs on how terrorists in the northeast get these arms despite closure of the nation's borders with neighboring countries. The Nigerian Governors Forum Security Committee, heads of security agencies at the council chamber in the presidential villa, all held a virtual meeting with the president, where President Muhammadu Buhari called for improved intelligence sharing among different security agencies. That meeting focused on the country's security policies and approaches in tackling internal security challenges, with a charge that intelligence gathering and sharing must be optimized for the nation to secure itself. Over the course of the last few weeks, see the president charge security officials to find a strategy that works against insecurity. But how important is external help? Let's talk to the National Vice President, Association of Retired Career Ambassadors of Nigeria, and former Office Director of the Institute for Security Studies in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and a former Nigerian representative to the African Union, Ambassador Olusegun Akinsoya. Thank you for joining us on Diplomatic Channel.
Yes. Thank you very much, Amara, for having me.
Now let me just begin by asking you what you make of the Minister of Information's comments last week. Mr. Lai Mohammed talked about Western powers, Western partners not selling Nigeria weapons to fight insurgency.
Well, thank you. I think the Honorable Minister's statement could be seen in the general context of the security situation in the country. You know, in the last few weeks and the month, there have been quite a lot of meetings held by the President with the security chiefs, with the National Council, with the governors, and they also met the Speaker and also the Senate President. All within the context of the concerns about the general situation, security situation in Nigeria that has caused quite a lot of concerns. A lot of people, Nigerians, believe that there's needs to re-strategize, to look at the peace and security architecture and to find out, the reasons why there have been a resurgence of killings and insecurity in the northeast, with the Boko Harams affecting a lot of damage to people and properties, and also with the banditry in the northwest, and all that security situations all over Nigeria. And also the president has made quite a lot of statements regarding the need to rejig the need to really be able to stem all these killings. There will be meetings with the northeastern governors and the committee that was set up to address this situation.
We'll have more coming up on Diplomatic Channel after the break. Stay with us. But Ambassador, how do you now interpret this side by side? This same administration that said a few years ago that Nigeria has technically defeated the Boko Haram. Now we're saying we don't have enough weapons and that foreign powers are refusing to sell weapons to us?
Well, you must understand this in its proper context, Tamara. Terrorism is global, and they're fighting an asymmetrical war, unconventional war. And yes, it is true that the last few years, I mean, during this regime, quite a lot of things have been done. In terms of the insurgency, minimizing or virtually removing the insurgency, in which about 14 local governments have flags of the Boko Haram, but this has reduced considerably. But I think what is being done is that there is always need in conflict situations, in the fighting terrorism, to strategize, because the other side also, they are, having their homework, they are getting a lot, they are in sophistication of weapons and armaments, and they are receiving some external support. And also, so it's yes, that statement was made, but at the same time, we all know that it is not done. It is not done yet, and there's need for all forces to be mustered, in addressing the security situation in the country.
Yeah, you have mentioned strategy, and that's where I was going next, because it appears that almost everything seems to still be a challenge, for the Nigerian army, for the Nigerian military. We've mentioned the Boko Haram is getting weapons from the outside. The president is confused where exactly they're getting weapons from because borders are closed. And then you have the Minister of Information who says that foreign powers are refusing to sell to us. And then this war against insurgency has been ongoing for almost over 10 years. And yet we're back to this problem of strategy.
Well, I think it must be an ongoing thing. Strategizing in fighting terrorism is very important, and it has to be holistic. In fact, it's strategizing means, coming to table to identify what are these problems. Are there internal problems in terms of interagency collaboration? Is it the question of weapons? Is it that the intelligence or the data gathering has not been what it is? Are they not receiving the cooperation of the communities, the leaders, and then the local people? Because, you see, on the other side, there have been quite a transformation, a development of the terrorists, of terrorism and insurgency worldwide, and particularly West Africa. The whole of the Sahel has now been infiltrated by the ISIL, the ISWA, and also the influences of the situation in Libya and Sudan. And I think the strategizing now will now have to involve coming to the table, the security chiefs, the Air Force, the Army, the intelligence, and to be able to collaborate to stem this. And also, it has to be an all people's strategy. And we have seen that in terms of the involvement of the governors, involvement of the local leaders, involvement of the people, so that all this will complement what the military is doing in terms of targeting the spots where the cells where they are operating. It also required international support, international cooperation. And that is where the statement that was made by the minister was very apt. The president also did make some indications that we're likely to get arms from Jordan, from other places, from Western part. But as I said, it is a geopolitical problem.
Well, I do believe it is a joint effort, at this point. But Commander of Special Operations Command Africa, that's AFRICOM to be exact, Major General Dagvin Anderson did say that extreme groups are trying to settle down in various parts of Africa after the destabilization in Syria and in Iraq. He also says that they're seeing them continue to further south in Burkina Faso towards littoral nations in the Gulf of Guinea and also further west towards Senegal and West Africa. He says this is concerning and there is no military solution, that these are wicked problems. What do you think about that?
Well, in your intro, you did make reference to my antecedents. As part of my post-diplomatic engagement or post-state engagements, I worked with the Institute for Security Studies as the regional representative. And we did quite a lot of studies. In fact, I brought some researchers to the Institute of International Affairs, and we look at the whole problem of the Sahel, particularly with the end of the problem in Libya and the breakup of the militants in Syria and the ISIL, that the whole of the Sahel is now being infiltrated by terrorists. And with a lot of recruitment, you have all these effects spreading into the Sahel, the northern part of Mali, part of Senegal with the Casamance area, and also, and this is having a lot of effects. It's out of recruitment, sophistication of weapons. And the whole of the Sahel is not free because of quite a lot of problems, there's the socio-cultural affinities, there is the porosity of our borders and all that. So it requires a sort of a holistic approach. One of the things we came out with in that study in the meeting with the Institute of International Affairs is to now broaden the concept, the narrow perception of security to human security. Human security, I define that as the totality of all that makes an individual to be secure in his environment. It involves the issue of food security, poverty, not only state actors, in that you refer to the state's intervention, because the primacy of protection of life and property rests with the government. But at the same time, the non-state actors have a responsibility in terms of information gathering, in terms of making the all people's effort. So application of the idea of human security is key to fighting terrorism, because there's also the humanitarian dimensions. We have a lot of IDPs. What has come of some of the IDPs that we have in these areas? In fact, it has been, because the failure to get back to livelihood creates additional problems for government. So it's going to be inclusive, it's going to be holistic. Yes, military intervention, military engagement, equipping ourselves with the necessary armament to be able to match the sophistication of the terrorists is key. But at the same time, we must look at the other complementary efforts in fighting terrorism. This is what is done in other places. So it cannot just only be military. Even though I agree that is key. We can only win this war through our military prowess, getting the right support, getting the right equipment, and getting also to key into the welfare of our armed forces to be able to perform the
Ambassador
role
Hussein,
that they
thank
should
you
perform.
so much for joining us on Diplomatic Channel. Wish we had more time. I will have to invite you again to talk some more about this. Thank you for spending time with us on Diplomatic Channel.
Well, thank you very much, Amara. Thank you for having me.
This is where we end the program this week. Thanks for staying with us, and I hope you will join us again. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Bye for now.